Hello, and welcome back to The Wrinkle. Today I'd like to share the piece of advice that I give out the most often in my office. Let me explain. I'm a specialist. I'm a geriatrician, so I'm an internist with extra training in the care of seniors. So people come to see me when they've been referred by another physician or nurse practitioner. It's usually when the physician has a very specific question that they would like an expert like myself to answer. So I tend to see similar diseases, conditions over and over again. I'm sure you've heard the saying that a specialist is somebody who knows everything about nothing. And on the other hand, a generalist is someone who knows nothing about everything. So I'm not saying that I know everything about nothing, but I do know a lot about a very specific area. The other thing is that people who come to see me are individuals. Everybody has their own way of presenting with, for example, dementia. Everybody's different. So it's not like I say, oh, I've seen this problem before, I'm going to give my stock answer. It's not. Everyone's an individual, and we take an individual approach when we're giving feedback and when we're doing an assessment. However, there are certain human responses to some of the conditions that I deal with that are very common. And so over the almost 20 years that I've been in practice, my team and we've developed some ways of communicating with the people that we see. I call it advice. And I'm going to share some of that advice with you. So the piece of advice that I give the most often is to go into the world of the person who's living with dementia. Go into their world. Now, I had to use this piece of advice again last week when I was seeing a couple. The fellow is living with dementia. He's 85 years old, and this couple has been married for about 50 years. And his partner happens to be another man. And he said, I think that things would be easier if he just kind of got it. If he just understood that he's forgetful, or, he's really confident. He's overconfident. He thinks he's going to be able to do something when he knows he can't because of his Alzheimer's. So we went over again what we've talked about before here on The Wrinkle, that insight is one of the things that's affected in Alzheimer's. It's typical that a person will overestimate what they can do. And it's not because they are conceited or cocky or in denial. It's because the insight into the condition has changed, along with short-term memory. And that produces that anosognosia, so not recognizing that we don't recognize or that we don't know. We actually got into a bit of a discussion and we explored a little bit more. Would it be better for someone who's living with Alzheimer's to be very acutely aware of the fact that it's there and the changes that it's bringing about? Maybe it's a little bit protective for the person who's living with Alzheimer's to have a bit of a filter or a bit of a buffer in between knowing the full truth of how the Alzheimer's is affecting them and how they perceive it to be affecting them. If the person living with Alzheimer's has the impression that things are just fine, well, maybe that's good. But as a person who's a care partner for someone who's living with dementia, trying to convince somebody that they have dementia and that they are forgetful and that they're likely to have difficulty with something is really not going to bear fruit. That kind of approach is going to go nowhere. Don't start the argument. You will lose. It's just not the way to go. And in the course of arguing, it will create negative feelings and negative emotions in the moment. And a lot of people who are living with dementia are living in the moment because building new memories can be challenging. And so it's important to try to make those moments as positive as possible, especially when it's an interaction with a care partner. Now, this advice sounds pretty simple and straightforward. It's not easy. And oftentimes it's something that a care partner has to practice over and over and over again. And sometimes a care partner will lose patience. And at those times, it's okay to take a step away and take a break and maybe get some respite and maybe talk to a dementia support counselor or a peer who's also a care partner, or even your dog, somebody who's going to listen and understand. It's okay to find it challenging, to not argue back or try to redirect someone into reality. Those are natural responses when somebody's reality does not line up with what we perceive. And it's okay to find that difficult. But with practice, it might get a little bit easier. So that's the piece of advice that I give the most often in my office. Go into the world of the person who's living with dementia. Don't try to argue. Don't try to reorient into reality. It's a losing proposition. Stay in the moment and try to make that moment as positive as possible. Let me know what your experiences are and whether you've heard this advice or something similar, and whether it was helpful to you. I'd love to hear your point of view. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on The Wrinkle.